Legends, I'm Cerberus and welcome back to my channel. Today's review is the British Tier 6 heavy cruiser Cheshire, and it's a review that I doubt many people will actually want to watch because A, it's very late and it's been done to death already, and B, it's a ship that has a deservedly bad reputation. Even though I'm not expecting this review to be much more than 10 minutes, you can find the timestamps for the different sections in the description below. For those of you that just want a summary of my thoughts on the ship, the too long didn't watch review along with a new section, the strengths and weaknesses, will follow immediately after the history and design, which is a very brief section this time round because the ship doesn't exist. The ship is essentially a what-if variant of one of Winston Churchill's supercruiser designs, which were explored when he was appointed First Lord of the Admiralty following the outbreak of World War II. Two ship designs were drafted. One was a 15,000-ton, 9-gun, 203mm armed ship, with the second being a 12-gun, 234mm armed ship displacing just over 22,000 tons. PC players will recognise these two ships as Albemarle and Goliath respectively. Only the 203mm armed cruiser was given any serious consideration, with that project only being scrapped in mid-1943. So what is Cheshire, you might ask? Well, Cheshire is a wargaming flight of fancy and is a bastardised design featuring the hull of the 203mm armed cruiser with an armament comprising of 3 twin 234mm guns in the ABX positions, 8 twin 114mm guns, 2 quadruple torpedo launchers, a metric Astord of 40mm Stag and 20mm Orlican AA guns, rounding out her offensive and defensive weapons. With the brief history lesson done, here's a quick rundown of the ship's in-game strengths, weaknesses, and my summarised thoughts before we move on to the more in-depth stuff such as builds, consumables and strategy. Looking at her strengths first, Cheshire comes equipped with a heel and has the highest hit point pool of any Tier 6 cruiser. She has excellent HE with great penetration, high fire chance and good damage. Her AP shells can overmatch the bow armour of all equal tier and below cruisers, and she also has pretty solid mobility with good concealment. On to the negatives, we have an enormous and exposed citadel, long reload with inconsistent accuracy and very floaty shells. She's a huge target, and she also has pretty poor gun arcs. On the face of it, she seems quite promising, but don't be fooled, she is a pretty poor ship in my opinion, with a very high skill floor, which is probably why I'm not a fan. And while not as bad as Charlemagne or Abruzzi, your hard-earned doubloons could be spent on better ships. Sure, she has overmatch capability, but she has a very long reload, the lowest DPM of any T6 cruiser, with poor gun angles, which mean you need to expose your very vulnerable broadsides to get all the shots off, and inconsistent accuracy, which make her very frustrating to play. It is worth noting, however, that when things do go well, it is a very rewarding ship thanks to the high damage and high penetration shells with decent alpha potential. When it comes to the commanders, I've had some limited success using two builds, and I can already sense the hate from Menace and Coyote. The first build, which I had decent results with, was using essentially a VII Hipper Special, whereby I have a level 14 2 William Tennant with ingenious full speed ahead, velocious steer clear and refill station with Carl von Mueller and Bruce Fraser inspirations. And for modules, I am using aiming systems mod 2 with steering gears mod 2 and 3. However, after having played around with this is something I wouldn't recommend fully myself, as while I did manage to have a 40km top speed and a sub 4 second rudder shift, I was uncomfortably close to the enemy ships for the majority of the time, and when you're in such a large ship, that's not the best way forward. So eventually I settled on a Bruce Fraser 16-2 with Beyond Range, Igniter, Light Fortress, Fixated, and Refill Station with Nikolai Kuznetsov and Andrei Rue's inspirations, who are both 15.2 and 16.2 respectively, although Lemony also works quite well in place of Andrei Rue. Modules wise, it's unchanged, so it's aiming systems mod 2 with steering gears mod 2 and 3. Why, you might ask? Well, because long range, reasonably agile HE spam and sniper. Currently I have a 17.1km range on my guns with a 27% fire chance every 16.2 seconds, and with 1/4 HE penetration same as the British battleships, that's very nice. I have heard rumours of other players speccing the ship for either full stealth or full heal builds, but in my experience this boat needs to be as far away from the fight as possible, which means distance. Taking a quick look at the ship's consumables, she's really nothing special in this department. She has the standard cruiser damage control party of 5 second duration to 6 second reload. Her sonar is the same as the one found on Belfast, with a 2.9 and 4.2km detection of torpedoes and ships respectively, with a 94 second duration and 108 second reload and 2 charges as standard. She also gets a standard battleship heal, which recovers 0.5% of her max hit point per second for 28 seconds, with an 80 second reload and 2 charges. This is exactly the same heel as found on Exeter, Gaspee and most non-British battleships. Moving swiftly onto her stats, Cheshire is an interesting ship with big numbers in many places, and some of those places being not where you really want those big numbers to be to start off with. But hey, don't shoot the messenger. With my current build, starting with survivability, we have 42,500 hit points, which as I said a bit earlier on, is the highest of any T6 cruiser. Her armour ranges from 13mm on the superstructure to 178mm on the turret faces, with everything else being a jumble sail of different thicknesses. Her belt armour is, however, a juicy 152mm, which means you can bounce more shells if you angle correctly. Torpedo protection is a rather healthy 19%. When it comes to pew-pews, she's armed with 6 234mm guns in 3 twin turrets, which means she can overmatch the bow armour of equal tier and lower cruisers with her armour-piercing shells. She pays for this by having a 16.2 second reload with 27.7 second touch reverse time, but I do have a rather nice 17.1km range, and when I'm using refuel stationing close to allies, that extends to almost 19km. The HE shells, with my Rui as inspiration, are a hefty 4023 damage with a 27% fire chance. And remember, these have 1/4 penetration, so they can damage up to 58mm of armour as well. Her AP shells hit citadels for 5750 damage, and for a cruiser she has a surprisingly potent secondary armour consisting of 8 twin 140mm guns with a 4.7km range, 3 second reload, which hit for up to 1600 damage and it have a 10% fire chance to boot. Those twin quadruple torpedo launchers have a reload of 96 seconds with an 8km range, 61 knot top speed, 1.3km section radius, and dish out 15,433 damage. When it comes to traversing the map, Cheshire is no slouch, with my build managing to hit a 34.9 knot speed and having a respectable 5.1 second rudder shift. But she does have a fairly ponderous 720 meter turning circle. And when it comes to her concealment, the ship is fairly solid with 11.1km section radius by sea, 7km by air, but her smoke firing penalty is pretty poor for a cruiser at 7.2km. Now onto playstyle and strategy. As mentioned near the start, I tend to play the ship as almost as far away from the battle as I possibly can, at least in the early game, and especially so when facing tier 7. As in most cruisers, you don't want to be the centre of attention, and her armour is strong enough to bounce most AP shells when angled, but anything with a gun caliber of more than 228mm will overmatch your 60mm bow armour, and you have a flat arse, so shells just go through that with ease anyway. With careful angling and a bit of luck, you can also bounce up to 15-inch shells off your upper belt plating, but do be wary because your citadel is literally this. Taking citadels at mid to short range is almost a given, which is why I recommend the double rudder build and playing at longer range, because twerking that rear from side to side to deflect is key to survival, especially when you don't have a get out of jail free card in the form of smoke screens. I've had my best games skirting around the edges of the main engagement, supporting my teammates by flinging HE at exposed cruisers and battleships. Discounts any hits to the belt, armour and modules, the penetration of the ship's HE shells will pretty much guarantee some hefty chunks of damage from your 6 guns, as well as a high likelihood of setting some fires as well. While I am certain there will be a contingent of individuals spitting feathers at the suggestion of primarily using HE, hear me out. You only have 6 shells firing each time, the accuracy of the shells can be a bit hit and miss, and the fact that the large caliber of the guns also increase the likelihood of having an overpenetration. High explosive is simply more consistent and more reliable. You may notice I specifically called out cruisers and battleships there, because similarly to Graf Speed down at tier 5, this ship is not a destroyer hunter. Her inconsistent accuracy, low shell volumes and slow rate of fire mean she's very hit and miss when it comes to hitting destroyers. So I have a tendency, probably much to the chagrin of my teammates, to ignore them unless they're either a ship that is an immediate threat to me and that I can finish off with a single salvo, there are no other targets in range or firing line, or I'm the only ship with a good chance of hitting the target. Is that bad team play? Possibly, but why compromise my damage dealing abilities if my services can be used effectively elsewhere? When you're equal or top tier, you can play Cheshire with a bit more aggression, especially in situations where you can manhandle other cruisers thanks to your overmatchability. It is quite satisfying slapping bow tanking heavy cruisers for 10 to 15,000 damage to the bow, although detonating New Orleans with HE is also very amusing. You still need to be careful of battleships though, and they can bring an end to your parade very quickly, as can those camping EOP fitted Atlantas, Flints and US light cruisers sailing bastards. Never ending streams of HE will whittle your hit points down at a worrying pace. And when you're bottom tier, the games aren't very much fun either, because high tier cruisers can manoeuvre better. and you can't overmatch them. Battleships have an easier time outranging you, and they also have more accuracy, and destroyers are simply just hellspawn. Try and stay as close to islands as possible, using your cover and your floaty shells to hit ships from afar while trying to remain undetected as you can. Where that's not an option, kite like your life depends upon it. And that just about sums up her gameplay. All in all, she's a capable ship, but she needs high level commanders and skilled players to make the most of it. I am at least 50% of the way there. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you all for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please do hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel out greatly. Take care. Bye for now. I'll catch you next time.